Hi students. Today, if you are receiving this message, that means that you have missed class. And so I wanted to make sure that you understood exactly what was going on with our final project and our mini lesson. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about our notebook check number 3 look fors. So on this screen, you can see that there are 4 different things that we looked at last week. The first thing was tracking challenging parts of our text, and that was looking at how characters connect, interact, or relate throughout the novel or series that you are reading. We talked a lot about kind of creating these flow charts or character charts to talk about how they connected. Another thing that we looked at were timelines. And so we talked about tracking the important events, but then also tracking about how characters feel during those events, or how the symbols might change throughout those events, or the setting, or just any way of tracking things that was not just the chronological order of events. We also talked about character pressures and what are the things that put pressure on our characters, whether they're other individuals in the story, or pressure that the character puts on themselves, or even just like things that are going on around them, or how does the setting put pressure on characters. So just all of those plot elements and story elements, and how the character reacts to them, and their kind of their stress level or the pressure that puts on them. And then is there anything that lifts them up? And then lastly was the lesson that we did with symbolism, and how oftentimes it changes throughout the course of a novel or a series. And so what ways do setting, characters, plot, or any other element that we've talked about, how does that impact the symbol? And so over on the right, you can see over here that there are ways to show proficiency and then to show kind of that above and beyond. So that is your notebook check. I will be collecting notebooks from you if you missed Monday, today, 2/17. I'll be taking your notebook when you return back. So just one thing to watch for is this notebook check. The next thing I want to talk to you about was just our short mini lesson. And so we just discussed some of the different books that are within the dystopian genre that were written before you were born, that were before I was born, but are currently very relevant. Fahrenheit 451 was just made into a series on HBO a couple years ago, and The Handmaid's Tale is a series on Hulu that was created just a few years ago. I think it's in its 3rd season now. It's either being filmed or getting ready to be released. And so these were comments on society from decades ago, but are still very relevant. And so one of the things that we need to keep in mind as we read is that how do the books that are being written now, or how are the books written in the past, still connect to our world today? So what we did is we took a look at a section from Ponies, and we looked at interaction between Top Girl and Barbara. We looked at actually 2 different interactions, and talked about how this could potentially relate to our world, and how Top Girl oftentimes represents this like overwhelming popular character, and how she treats the others around her. And so that's something that's very relevant to middle schoolers today. And so just how we can take small moments from our books to connect to the world around us. And there's obviously things that are much bigger. If you think about the Hunger Games, and how right, we do not have a Hunger Games where students are fighting one another, or put in an arena and expected to harm one another or kill one another. But there's still different moments from that story that you can connect to our world today, right? Kind of, we've talked about love triangles. That's something that's very relevant, right? We've talked about how there are, there are societal pressures put on characters. And so those are all things that happen in books that are very relevant to our world. And then the last thing that we talked about was our packet work that I know a lot of you are curious about. And so I'm going to show you in your packet very shortly here what's expected for today. But most of you were here on Friday, and so you were asked to create a 1-pager that included your mentor text, so the one that you just read, whether it's Among the Hidden, Fahrenheit 451, Lord of the Flies, Legend, Maze Runner, whatever it is, that's your mentor text. And then you wanted to compile all the information that you might need to help create comparisons. And so in the next video, I'm going to go over the aspects of the dystopian literature final assessment that you should be working through today.